everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Chris Kimball, and we're here with Legacy Tours and Travel and talking about some exciting things. Who could be excited about travel, right? You guys bored and kind of tired of being stuck at home? Well, we're excited because we are planning a trip to Egypt with our guide, Bruce Porter, who's with us tonight. And I wanted to share a little bit about Bruce. He earned his bachelor's degree in ancient Near Eastern studies from BYU and went on to receive his master's degree in Middle East studies with an emphasis in Semitic languages. He has studied Hebrew, Aramaic, Akkadian, Coptic, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and other languages with a minor in ancient Near Eastern religions. His graduate coursework was in the history of religions with an emphasis on Egyptian religion and textual studies. Bruce Porter has done extensive research for the BYU's Religious Studies Center on the Pearl of Great Price and the Book of Abraham, and been instrumental in the research and discovery of Antonio Lebolo Will. He has done scriptural research in the major museums and libraries of Europe, the Middle East, and the United States. Bruce Porter is also the author of many books, which titles include Prophecies and Promises, the Book of Mormon, An Everlasting Decree, The Threshing Floor of Faith. Class notes and study guides have been published on the Book of Moses, a scriptural study guide for the Book of Revelation, as well as other papers on specific spiritual and doctrinal topics. Coupled with his writing and research, Bruce Porter's background has presented him with an opportunity to host and lead and guide tours, working for BYU Travel Study, Murdoch Travel, LDS Travel with other travel companies, as well as private tours. We're especially excited to have Bruce be able to be with us on our particular tour. And before I turn the time over to Bruce, I just want to let our Facebook Live listeners that are joining in know that you can actually participate in the Zoom meeting tonight if you send an email to info@legacytours, TOURS, and travel.com. info@legacytoursandtravel.com. That way we can send you a link and then you can hop on and hear the presentation from Bruce and also be able to look at the slides that he's going to show us tonight. So what we would ask you to do is allow Bruce to give his information, and then after he's finished, we're going to open it up to a Q&A. And so any questions that you have about this Everything Egypt tour, we'll be able to answer for you tonight. So without any further ado, we will turn the time over to Bruce Porter.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to try and share my screen here so that you can kind of see some slides that I've put together about the trip. I appreciate the opportunity of being able to go with Legacy. I actually, first time I went to Egypt was right after Moses took the children of Israel out. It seems that way. It hadn't changed much by the time I got there in 1974 and 75, and I've been going back often almost every year since that time. So I've spent quite a bit of time in Egypt. I know a lot of people, have a lot of friends there. But I'm gonna share my screen so you can see some of the slides. We're gonna go through kind of not every site we're going to see, but the main sites that we're going to be able to see, because of the time that we're going to be able to spend in Egypt. We're going to be able to see a lot more than a lot of people, and because I know different places, I know how to get into places. I know who to slip a few dollars in the right hands in order to get into tombs or temples that are generally closed to the public. We can do that and see things that are actually related to our scriptures and the Book of Abraham. So I will try and see if I can make this work. We'll start in Cairo at really at the Giza Plateau, and we'll go through those pictures as soon as I can get as soon as I can share my screen. I've got a kind of a PowerPoint put together so that we can see the different sites. But we will go from Cairo all the way down to Aswan, and then even further south to the border of ancient Nubia, which will be down to Abu Simbel. And then we'll work our way north again back to Cairo. And we'll see if we can get this. In the book of Abraham, it says that the first Pharaoh was a righteous man. It says he sought earnestly to imitate that order established in the days of the first patriarchs. It says he set the government of Egypt up based upon the patriarchal order, which is what we see in Genesis from Adam to Noah, after Noah. And then he says, and he sought earnestly to imitate that order, and it's talking about the religion. It says the government of Egypt in Abraham, it says the government of Egypt was based upon the patriarchal order, which it is and was. And it says that the religion of Egypt was based upon the religion of the patriarchs. And we're going to be able to see that, which means if it was based upon the religion of the patriarchs, it was based upon a true religion. And so it says that first Pharaoh was a righteous man and sought earnestly to imitate that order established by the first patriarchs, even the patriarch Adam, at his time, that was set up by God to Adam and to those early patriarchs. And he sought earnestly to do that. And as we're in Egypt, you're going to be able to see, the gospel in Egypt. Now you have to remember too, that Egypt was not functioning under a Mosaic order or that gospel that Pharaoh earnestly imitated. That religion of the patriarchs was not a lesser gospel. It was actually the gospel. It was a religion of the patriarchs, not one of the lesser law of Moses that comes much later, but it was patterned after the Melchizedek order and the higher order that was established with Adam and continued down through the patriarchs all the way down to Moses, until Moses and takes the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so we're going to see, you'll be able to learn probably more about the temple in Egypt, about our temple. Okay, well, it's going to be an Egyptian tour. I just started a little bit talking about the book of Abraham and how he said that Pharaoh was a righteous man and sought earnestly to imitate. Now, I've done a video on that about the gospel in Egypt. And if you go to this website here, it's my website where I keep a lot of my research. And in the right-hand corner, when you get there, you go to View Now, or over in the lower right-hand corner, Scripture Discussions, and then the videos will come up and you'll see the book of Abraham and the gospel in Egypt. So if you do that, then you'll be able to hear one of the presentations I have given on the book of Abraham and the gospel in Egypt. So go to bhporter.net, and then down on the right-hand on the landing page, lower right-hand, on the landing page, you can get Scripture Discussions and click on that and do the first one. That's the book of Abraham and the gospel in Egypt. We're going to start. This is just a quick map of Egypt. You see Cairo up at the top of the map here. We'll come into Cairo. We'll spend some time in Cairo, going to the pyramids and things like that. But then we're going to fly down south to Aswan. If you see down here, we're going to go to Aswan. We'll take a bus to Abu Simbel. There's a possibility we might fly actually to Abu Simbel and start there, but then we'll come from, which is right on the border of Nubia. I mean, we'll be down almost to the border of Egypt, the southern border of Egypt. From there, we'll spend time in Aswan. And in Aswan, when we're finished our tour of that area there, we'll get on a cruise ship, and then we'll start on a Nile cruise ship, and then we'll start traveling north on the Nile, stopping at Komombo, Edfu, Esna on the way, stopping at Luxor and at Karnak area, Thebes. And then we'll take a bus from there down to Dendera and Abydos, which are sites that a lot of people won't see and don't get to see when they're on a tour. And I can promise you, Dendera and Abydos will be the highlight. I mean, Luxor and Karnak is an open air museum. So we'll actually begin with pyramids, starting with the pyramids. We have, often people think these are the oldest pyramids in Egypt, and they're not. They're just some of the largest. You have Cheops, Khafre, and Mycerinus. Cheops is the furthest one. This one back here, that's Cheops, but it is the largest one, even though Khafre's pyramid looks larger. It's just higher on elevation. And then you have Mycerinus, and then the three smaller pyramids here for the wives of Mycerinus. we'll have an opportunity there at the pyramids, so there at Giza on the plateau. I know the guy who owns the camels, and we'll get to go on a camel ride. His name is Moses. His boy, I know his boy, and I know the people that work for him very well, and they're good people, and they'll give us a camel ride out into the desert so you can get pyramids, pictures with pyramids in the background. We'll have also an opportunity, if you want to go inside of one of the pyramids. They usually only open up the pyramids every once in a while, and they don't have the same one open all the time. They'll rotate the pyramid, so we'll be able to get inside of the pyramid. And this is the one that we'll usually go in, of Cheops. We'll enter in here. They broke in, Belzoni broke in, carved in, or dug out a tunnel here in the bottom to get in, and he found the shafts. And we'll be able to go in through the entrance, come down and go into the gallery, and then the grand gallery, and then up into what they call the king's chamber. Many people think that that's where the pharaoh was buried, but my feeling is that he was actually buried in the bottom, because they always go down, and there's some ritual and symbolic reasons why they're buried under this under the pyramid of the primordial mound. Now you can go in there. I think it costs you an extra $5 or something per person, because it doesn't come with the tickets to Giza, but if you want to go in there, you can. This first little shaft here, this first area here is quite small. You have to bend down a little bit to walk in, but it's a lot of fun to get in there. At least you can say you've done it. I was in there one time many years ago. I think it was back in the 80s, 1980s, and there was a busload of Japanese people in there ahead of me, and all of a sudden they got claustrophobia, and the whole busload had to get out of there at the same time. They were running over each other, trying to get out of there, screaming. And I was able to back into a crack there in the gallery, back into a crack, and let him get out. But it went through him just like somebody put gasoline on him. Everyone was trying to get out of there at the same time. It was a fun trip. It's the time of year that we're there is going to be nice. The weather is going to starting to cool down, but the inside of these things can be a little bit warm, but it's fun. This shaft here that goes up, if you see this shaft going up, can you see my cursor when I move my cursor on there? Okay, if you see my cursor, this shaft that goes up, this shaft goes right. When the North Star is there, there's a stone. Everybody thinks it's a sarcophagus. I don't think it is. I think it was filled with water. If it was filled with water, then the North Star would reflect in the center of the pyramid in that sarcophagus, because it would shine down that shaft. Pyramids have to be oriented to the four corners of the world. They have to do that, and there's reasons for that. And we'll talk about the reasons how this pyramid is connected to our temple, because pyramids represent the primordial mound. As the waters of creation covered the earth and the dry land appears, that's where God stands on that dry land to finish the rest of creation. And that then becomes the closest point between heaven and earth. And that's where you want to be buried, is at that closest point between heaven and earth. And so they're buried here because that's what it represents. And our temples represent that too. Our temples represent that primordial mound. They represent where creation always begins. They represent the Garden of Eden, the closest point between heaven and earth. And it's that primordial mound. That's why all our headstones are rounded on the top, because they represent that primordial mound. You want to be buried in the closest point between heaven and earth. But anyway, that's one reason that the burial is actually down below. So we'll be able to see that. We'll go to the Sphinx, which is right there next to that. You can't see it now, but we'll be able to see the Sphinx that's there, the ones that's behind me on my picture. This was back in the about the 1820s, something like that, this picture there that we have of the Sphinx. But we'll be able to spend time and move from the pyramid down to the Sphinx. They actually found, let me go back here on this page, if you see this building here on your left, and then these pits here on this side, they have actually found the bark of Cheops, the royal boat that they brought, the funerary boat that they brought the Pharaoh Cheops down the Nile and then brought it up. There's a causeway here where they would bring the sarcophagus up when they buried him, and they buried the boats here, and we can be able to go in to see that boat. They found it intact. They didn't find it intact. It was in pieces in the pits, but they put it back together again. And this building here houses that boat when it's put back together. It's really unusual. And and fun to see because they brought in the cedars from Lebanon in order to build the boat, and the wood is still there and intact when they put the boat back together. So we'll be able to see that. It'll be a lot of fun. After leaving Giza, we'll go to Saqqara. Saqqara is where the oldest pyramid in the world is. And Saqqara is a step pyramid. When they would bury people, anciently they would make this mound. They would make this imitation primordial mound, and they would bury the people inside that imitation primordial mound, and that was called a mastaba. Well, when the architect Imhotep, he was the one hired to build or construct this new type of primordial mound, and he built mastaba on top of mastaba. Mastaba is kind of a rectangular raised plateau. Even our temples are built on a primordial mound. Most of our temples are either on a hill or on an artificial hill, and a mastaba is an artificial hill, and a pyramid represents that primordial mound. And so this is what an artist's conception of what it would look like. You can see the outer walls. These walls go in and out and in and out and in and out. That's called crenellation. They use crenellated walls because of the way they anciently constructed sacred sites out of reeds along the riverbanks, and the crenellation gives it strength. The Mesa Temple is actually what is constructed after the oldest style, because the Mesa Temple has crenellated walls, much like the temple complex there at Saqqara, but it's one of the oldest. As we go into Saqqara, they've actually discovered in the last few years, the city of Memphis has been there for a long time, but they discovered in just the last few years the prison of Memphis, which is on the outskirts of Saqqara and right next to the floodplain. And that's the prison that Joseph was kept in for 15 years. Joseph that was sold into Egypt. We'll be able to stop there and take a few pictures of the remnants of that prison too. And then go into some of the tombs, smaller pyramids, and the tombs of Unas and others where we get the pyramid text from. This is Saqqara today, and if you could look at it, you can see it's a rectangle built on top of a rectangle built on top of a rectangle. And that's how they used to bury. They would make a single rectangle. It was called a mastaba, and we'll see those in Giza and around. And then Imhotep decided to stack those up in Saqqara, where this is called a step pyramid at Saqqara. It becomes the oldest pyramid of Zoser. Memphis, which is part, the Egyptians believe that because the sun went down in the west, everyone needed to be buried on the west side. Sun comes up in the east. That's where the cities are in the east, and all the burials are on the west side. Because that's where the sun goes down. And so we'll be able to go into Memphis, which was the ancient city. Now Memphis, this is an artist rendition of what Memphis was, but Memphis anciently, Memphis is the Greek word, but it's Nebhej anciently in Egyptian, and it means the city of white walls is what it actually means. And Memphis was the capital when Abraham, we're going to be in Memphis, and this is where Abraham was. This is where Joseph was. This is where he worked for Potiphar. This is where he becomes the vizier, the I don't know what you want to call it, the prime minister of Egypt. This is where Moses lived. This is where Moses grew up in Memphis. We'll be here in Memphis, where all three of those great prophets. There's not much there now. They have found a lot of ruins, but they built if you want to call it a modern city on top of the ruins, and they just can't move everybody else, but they have done a lot of excavations there. And while we're there, we'll see one of the statues of Ramses. It was the capital of Egypt for millennia. And Ramses has his statue there. They have found two of these statues of Ramses. We'll be able to go into that little museum there and see the statue of Ramses. You can see it's quite large. In his hand right here, he's holding a scroll. Every pharaoh that is depicted in a statue that is alive, you can always tell a live pharaoh from a dead one, because the live one has his legs spread apart like he's walking. A dead one in the shape of will be in the pattern of Osiris, and his legs will be together. But if he's alive, he'll have a scroll written in his hand. In Abraham, it tells us that that first pharaoh, being righteous, it says, even though he was cursed pertaining to the priesthood, He would fain claim the rights of the priesthood through the lineage of his fathers, is what it says in the text. Fain claim the rights of the priesthood. Well, this thing in his hand right here is a rolled up scroll. And on the end of that, you can't see it from this picture, but on the end of that is his cartouche, his name. That rolled up scroll, just as Abraham says, that the Pharaohs would fain claim the rights of the priesthood through the lineage of their fathers. That was their line of authority. That proved that they had, that was a genealogy that proved they had the right to rule and reign as Pharaoh. And we have the same thing in the church, somewhat we call our line of authority. So we'll be able to see the statue of Ramses right there in Memphis. From Memphis, there, we're going to probably fly down to Abu Simbel, and we'll be able to go into Abu Simbel. This is one of the most magnificent sites. And if you remember back in the 60s, probably most of you don't remember. I remember because, but when they moved the whole mountain because it was going to be flooded by the high dam. It was going to be flooded by the dam, and they moved the whole mountain, and they set it up on the same axis that it was before. And when we go into that, when we have an opportunity to go in that, on the equinox, it's situated such that the sun will shine right through that open door, right through that front door. The sun will shine right through that front door in a straight line and go back and light up the face of the Pharaoh on the very back wall. It's phenomenal as we see that. From there, we'll go on back down to Aswan. We'll go to the island of Philae and see the temple there in Philae. It's just on a small island. It's not a very, very large thing, but it's a very good temple, a very beautiful temple. We'll be able to spend time. We have to get there by boat because it is on an island. And the Nubians that are there, they basically run the boat. So we'll have an opportunity to meet some of them while we're there on the island. This is what it looks like. You can see the high dam here in the back. We'll go to the Aswan High Dam. We'll catch the boats around this little bend here and then come out here, dock in the bottom here, and then we'll be able to spend some good time going through the temple there at Philae. A very interesting place, a later temple, but very old. While we're there, I'm trying to make arrangements to make sure that we can go to a Nubian village. We'll get in a ship further, or in a little boat on the Nile, down away from the dam, and we'll go in a boat and go to a Nubian village. They still live the same way they did anciently in this village, and we'll meet a man who raises crocodiles and has crocodiles in his own home. He lives with a bunch of crocodiles in his home and spends some time there. From Aswan, we'll get on a cruise ship. They're not like the typical cruise ships that you're used to, but we'll get on a Nile cruise ship, and we'll start going down the Nile from Aswan towards Luxor. One of our first stops, often we'll travel at night or in the evening time. We'll be able to get off at Komombo. Komombo was a large settlement. There's not much left but the temple, but Komombo was the center of medicine. And when we get in there and look on some of the walls around Komombo, we'll actually be able to see how they were performing operations and how they had the medicine. And it even has the formulas for different medicines they will use. From there, we'll go to Edfu. We'll get to Edfu. We'll take horse and carriage through the town, probably through the town, and get to the temple of Horus at Edfu. This is one of the best preserved. There's two of the best preserved temples in Egypt, in all of Egypt, we're going to be able to see. One of them is Edfu here, and we'll be able to go into the temple. This pylon, as long as we're talking about this pylon in the beginning, in the front here, this is called a pylon. This entrance is called a pylon, and it goes up from the side, and then it comes down, and then it goes up again, and then over and comes down. That is the Egyptian symbol and hieroglyphic for the primordial mound. So we would be standing in water at one time, and then this primordial mound rises out of that water and goes up into the most sacred precincts of the temple. And we'll talk about that as we get in a little bit further. This is the courtyard of the temple itself. And I'll talk about this when I talk about the Karnak temple there, but this is the courtyard of the Edfu, temple of Edfu there, the temple of Horus at Edfu. But it's fabulous inside. The roof is still on. It's all there. It was covered up and then excavated. This is the Holy of Holies, or what's called the sanctuary in that temple, in the Temple of Edfu. This would be the royal bark. There would have been a golden statue of a god that would have sat in the royal bark right here. And then he would have been carried out at certain times of the year for certain festivals. But this is the sanctuary. Let's see, where am I? From Edfu, we'll stop at Esna. This is the Temple of Esna. The city's higher. They've kind of built a wall, a retaining wall around it when they excavate it. But this is inside, over on the right. This is inside of the Temple of Esna. And these are original colors. I mean, this picture doesn't do it justice, but these are the original colors in the temple. If you can imagine that the whole building and the whole inside was that color. It's a small, and we have to walk through the town to get there. We'll go through the old bazaar. We'll go through the bazaar as we get into Esna there. But the temple itself it's small, but it's very beautiful because all of the original colors are still there and still bright because the roof has been there the whole time. Well, after we stop at Esna, we'll get off the ship. We'll wake up in Luxor and Thebes. It's one of the largest two main temples in Luxor area. There's the Luxor temple and then the Karnak temple. This is the Luxor temple, again, representing the primordial mound. We'd be standing in the waters of creation if things were back anciently. But the temple itself, this is kind of, it's not a perfect straight axis like a lot of them. This is one that's fun to go to at night, and we will. The way they have it lit up at night, we'll be able to walk through there. The Luxor temple and the Karnak temple are almost 2 kilometers away. And there was an ancient road. This is the ancient road that linked the two temples together. They linked the two temples together, and there were sphinxes all the way down for these 2 kilometers between the two temples. And they're starting to excavate that now. It's fabulous to be able to see, walk down the Sphinx row and see the old road that goes from the Luxor temple to the Karnak temple. This temple was used during the Christian era. Interesting thing about Egypt is Egypt was the first country that became totally Christian after the time of Christ. It became totally Christian. And the Coptic church is the Christian church of Egypt now, and it's one of the oldest. And this temple in the back near the sanctuary was turned into a Christian church, a Christian building at the very end. That's what this niche is right here that you see in the center. And they still have the mosaics of some of the apostles on the walls there that we'll be able to see because they used the buildings that were already there when all of Egypt became Christian. Then they had all of these buildings. Now, in some of these buildings, because you couldn't have any images, any images of God in some of these Christian areas, they would chip out the faces of the people depicted on the temple in order to more Christianize it. And we'll be able to go through this little door here in the center, and then that goes back into the ancient sanctuary, the ancient Holy of Holies of the Egyptian temple. And we'll see, this was actually part of it was constructed by Alexander the Great. Now, the Temple of Karnak, or temples, just speaking of Egyptian temples and this primordial mound concept, I've got this on the right here is the Temple of Karnak. And temples have two types of axes in the Middle East. You have a straight axis temple and a bent axis temple. Egyptian temples, like the Temple of Solomon, or the Solomonic temple, is a straight axis temple. That is, if you go in through the front door and keep walking and keep going straight, you'll end up in the Holy of Holies. That's a straight axis temple. In Mesopotamia, when you walk in, you usually walk into the center of the building, and then you make a 90-degree turn to the left, and then you keep going back to the Holy of Holies. That's called a bent axis temple. The Mesa temple is a straight axis temple. If you walk in the doors of that temple, keep on going, you'll climb the stairs and go through the doors into the celestial room. So Solomon's temple is the same way. It was a straight axis temple. The interesting thing here, we're gonna see all of these, the square on each one of these is the sanctuary. The one on the right here is the Temple of Karnak, which is important. It's the largest temple complex in the world, actually, but it's massive. It's over 200 acres, the temple complex here at Karnak. One thing I want you to notice here, speaking of that primordial mound, everything represents that primordial mound. If you notice the ground level, as it goes higher, and then it gets higher until it gets to the sanctuary. Now, all of this is open air out here where you don't see the dark lines. This is open air out here, but you notice that from the open air, then you have a ceiling, and the ceiling gets lower, and then it gets lower, and then it gets lower, making this point where the God rests the closest point between heaven and earth, because this represents, that high point represents the place of creation, the Garden of Eden. It represents the center of that Garden of Eden, the closest point between heaven and earth. So even our temples are constructed the same way. So we'll be able to see that. One interesting thing is right on the outside here of the sanctuary, or the Holy of Holies, over here on the right-hand side there at the Temple of Karnak. There's two pillars on the outside, and the two pillars have what's on the front side and the back side. There's 6 vignettes or 3 vignettes on the front, 3 vignettes on the back. There's a total of 12 vignettes there. And that's what the Pharaoh has to do before he can enter into the Holy of Holies, before he can enter into the presence of God. And that is called the ritual embrace. And we're going to be able to see that on these 2 columns out here, and what takes place and has to take place on that. But we're really going to see it good in Abydos, where we're going to go. First, before we get to Abydos, we're going to stop at Dendera. Dendera is, I mean, these pictures I have, these are natural colors. These are the colors that have existed for 3,000 years. You can't believe what's there, and these pictures don't do it justice. But Dendera is one of those temples that's more complete than just about anything else you can find. The zodiac was found here at Dendera, is now in the Louvre there in Paris. But the colors are phenomenal. This is just some of them. This is what we'll see there at Dendera, and these are all natural colors. This is what's there and has been there since ancient times. It'll be a highlight of being able to see the way it was at one time, and how colorful it is. From there, we're going to go to Abydos. Abydos is the center of the worship of Osiris. Osiris is the god, the Egyptian god that represents Christ. He's the one. And the oldest written record in the world is called the Shabaka stone, and it was discovered in Egypt, and it goes back to the very first Pharaoh, that one that was righteous and sought earnestly to imitate. And it talks about the council in heaven. And it talks in that council in heaven, the father, Ptah, is deciding who he's going to make the god or the ruler of the earth. And he has 2 sons. He has one named Osiris, or Horus or Osiris, they transfer. And then another one, Set or Seth. And they begin to argue about who's going to be the one to rule this world. And there's this fight that goes on in this pre-earth council. And the father, in this text, in the Egyptian text, it says, and Ptah chose his most beloved son. Well, that makes his brother Set really mad. And so Set comes down to earth, and he ends up killing Osiris. And after Osiris is killed, he's resurrected. And because he's resurrected and the favored son, he's resurrected and exalted, and then gives everyone the power or the ability to be exalted like he is. That's the whole concept. The Egyptians weren't obsessed with death. They were obsessed with the next life. They were obsessed with eternal life. They were obsessed with exaltation. Now, as I talked about in Luxor, as we're in Luxor and Karnak, outside of the sanctuary, there's 2 pillars there that the Pharaoh has to do something before he enters that sanctuary. On these columns, each column, every column on every side, depicts what the Pharaoh has to do before he can enter into the presence of God. And that is what's called anciently the ritual embrace. The ritual embrace is where the Pharaoh has to embrace the God. His feet have to be together. His knees have to be together. His hand has to be on the shoulder of the God, and the God's hand has to be on the shoulder of the Pharaoh. And in that, he's given a blessing that he would have priested. And if I had the right one here, I would read it to you, and we'll see it here. You can barely see part of it right here. The God bestows upon Pharaoh, or endows upon the Pharaoh. It says in Egyptian, if I can remember, Di-Ankh Jed Wa'as Seneb Mitra Jeta. And it's what that says is, I give unto thee, I endow thee with eternal life, with priesthood, with posterity, and I bestow upon thee eternal health, like God has for eternity. that's what's being said while they're in this ritual embrace. And you can see this ritual embrace on all of the columns here. And that's what has to happen. The Pharaoh has to do before he can enter into the presence of God. So we'll be able to see that. And you'll find it's quite interesting as to how often this shows up. And remember that first Pharaoh was a righteous man and sought earnestly to imitate the religion of the patriarchs. Well, this is inside of Abydos here. We'll be able to go through the temple there at Abydos and be able to see these things. Before we finish, we'll see all of these things, and we're going to see a lot more. While we're at Luxor and Karnak, I discovered that there's a temple there. A lot of the anti-Mormons have often said that facsimile number 1 can't be true because the person lying on the bed, on the lying couch, his feet are apart, where that's supposed to be an embalming table and the feet are always supposed to be together. But there is a temple there connected to the temple of Karnak that I don't know. I don't want to say it's illegal or anything, but I will generally give the guards there a few dollars, and they let our group, so they don't let anybody else in. They're locked. This temple is locked. It hasn't been opened for 60, 70 years. And we can go into that temple and actually see a depiction on the walls inside of that temple that's exactly like facsimile number 1 with the legs apart, that everybody says doesn't exist. So it's like anything and anywhere, it's all who you know sometimes. So anyway, one of the fun things we're going to get to do, and I'm not going through all of the places and all the things that we're going to see, but one of the things that we're going to do is go to the old bazaar. This is the old Cairo, the ancient Cairo bazaar. We'll be able to go down through the streets. We'll get inside. This is actually over on the right-hand side. That's one of the gates, one of the ancient city gates of Old Cairo, that the wall and the gates, they always had a double gate there. We'll go through the old bazaar there. And there's some really neat places and a lot of fun things to get in there, souvenirs to get in there. There's a place up on top of the city, on top of the bazaar, where you can go up on top of the bazaar. And it's like going into the Twilight Zone. It's like stepping back in another world. It's just a fun place to spend a few minutes and have a few shops. One of the things we're going to be able to do is stop by some papyrus. There's two different things that people want to bring home from papyrus, and one is obviously the facsimiles, the 3 facsimiles we have in our Book of Abraham, and I'll have the papyrus shops that'll be ready for you when we get there. If anybody wants to purchase, you don't have to get it. They have it in multiple sizes. But one thing we don't realize, when Joseph Smith translated the Book of Abraham, he also translated the Book of Joseph. And when I was doing research for the church sent me over to Europe and the Middle East for 8 months just to do research on the Book of Abraham. Well, I had access to everything that the church had about the papyrus, about the mummies, and about Joseph Smith and the translation. Well, Joseph Smith said he translated the Book of Joseph. Well, as I was doing the research, I discovered the papyrus in there and knew that there was a description of the facsimiles in the Book of Joseph. And so I was working with Hugh Nibley back then, a long time ago, and he had asked me to team teach with him. And so I was spending a lot of time with him, and I took the picture of what the church has, the facsimile, there's some papyrus, the papyrus that the church has, the Joseph Smith papyrus. And I said, I think this is from the Book of Joseph. Well, he takes it out of my hand like Nibley and he looks at it for a minute, and then he says, yes, it is, and then hands it back to me. And I said, well, why haven't you written anything about it? And he said, because I don't want to unless I have to, which is his way of telling me to keep my mouth shut as long as he was alive. But that papyrus that was in the Book of Joseph, there's been multiple ones that are almost exactly like it, and that's the Papyrus of Annie. There's been 3 brethren talk about the papyrus or the Book of Joseph. Elder McConkie, Sidney B. Sperry, and James Talmage. They all said that the things that were in the Book of Joseph was of such a sacred nature that it shouldn't be published, it shouldn't be printed. And Elder McConkie added to that. They all said that, and Elder McConkie said that he felt that much of what we have in our temple and in the endowment came from the Book of Joseph. So I have found the best papyrus of the book that, if you want to call it a facsimile, the most complete facsimile of what was in the Book of Joseph that Joseph Smith had, and it's this one. It's from the Papyrus of Annie. Annie this is Annie over here on the left. He's dead now. This is Annie, but he was a scribe, and so he actually wrote his own Book of the Dead. And so this is Annie, and this is him here as a spirit. He's standing over his tomb. This is his spirit. and his heart is being weighed in this jar. That's Ib, that's the name for heart. It's being weighed against the Ma'at feather over here. And the Ma'at is everything true, just, right, good, everything that's perfect and holy. And his heart is being weighed. It's really character. It has to do with character. Anubis, who's the god of the resurrection, is sitting here testing the balance to make sure that justice or mercy will not be found wanting. Thoth, who is the scribe of the gods, and these are the 12 gods up on the top. These are the 12 gods who sit in judgment. Thoth is writing down the judgment. Thoth is considered the god who has language and endows people with knowledge and power. Thoth is he's Hermes in Greek mythology, and he's Enoch in Jewish traditions. Enoch was always called the scribe of Jehovah, and so he writes down the judgment. Well, the great devourer is right behind Thoth. Well, the great devourer is part crocodile, he's part lion, he's part hyena, and he's part hippopotamus. He's everything you don't want to meet after dark in Egypt. And so if the person's heart and character is found wanting, the great devourer eats him up. Of course, you pay good money to have these things written, so nobody ever gets eaten up. But Annie is now brought to this point. And I don't know if you notice if you look at Annie's clothing, it's white here. It starts to get gold here, and then even his hair and his whole body turns gold in this one. But Annie is brought to this point right here, and he has an escort, and Horus is the escort. So he's going through this, he's going through a judgment, he's proving himself true and faithful in everything. He's brought to this point with his escort, and the escort's hand being up like this means he's speaking. He's speaking to Osiris on the other side. He's speaking to Osiris on the other side. And it's what he's doing is he's presenting the dead person, Annie, at the veil, so to speak. And this is what he says. I'm gonna flip this out a little bigger and then move back to it. On the side here, this is what he says as his hand is out. He says, thus saith Horus, the son of Isis, I have brought unto thee the Osiris Annie. And then it says, his heart has come forth from the balance. And it says, Thoth hath waited according to the council or the decree from the council of the gods. And then it says that his heart is true. It says it's true and right. Ma'ah is true and right. He's not sinned against any god or any goddess. Then it says, may he be given bread, ta, and henket beer. I guess they didn't even drink the water back then. But and then it says, Peret M, it says, may he enter into the presence of Osiris and become like the followers of Horus forever. So it's what he's doing is the escort is presenting Annie, and he's saying he's done everything he's supposed to do. He's been judged. He's not sinned against any god or any goddess, and may he enter into the presence of the gods. And then he's entered into the presence of Osiris, and here he's kneeling down, making offerings to Osiris, and Osiris is the son of God, who fought his brother Seth, who was resurrected and exalted, giving Annie the opportunity to be exalted too. So we're going to be able to see these things and talk about these in depth while we're there. You can't touch 8 days in 30 minutes. So anyway, we're going to start. We're going to see basically from one end of the Nile to the other end, from Abu Simbel all the way down to the pyramids, stopping at Aswan, Komombo, Edfu, Luxor, Karnak, Thebes. We're going to get into the Valley of the Kings. We're going to see the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and the Queens. So we'll go there. I can't even begin to tell you how much you're going to see, because it'd take all night if we were. So anyway, that's a short Egyptian tour. And again, if you want to hear some of it's about an hour long presentation I gave on the gospel in Egypt, you can go to bhporter.net and look at it there. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to you. Is that all right?
Wow, Bruce, that was fascinating. I'm excited. I think I want to go. Actually, I am going. So when I talked to Bruce about being our guide, I wanted him to create a tour that had everything that you could possibly have, because I have actually been to Egypt before, it's been 10 years ago, but there's many things on this particular tour that I did not see. And we did spend a pretty good chunk of time. I think it was 5 days, but 5 days just is not enough if you want to see as much as what Bruce has been talking about tonight. But we want to open it up now to those of you that are listening in and see if you have any questions about the tour, logistics, or anything like that. We're ready to answer those, or content if you've got some content questions. But if you've got any questions, just go ahead and unmute and let's hear what they are.
Hi, this is Byron Terry. I had a question on how large your tours are. Are there 80 people? Or are there 20 people?
Well, on this particular tour, we do one bus. And so our maximum will be somewhere between 35 to 40 people. Is that right? Isn't that about right, Bruce?
Yes. Yeah. The buses hold about 44, but it's always better to keep a few extra seats, and one bus is always better. Two buses, it just makes it difficult for everybody, for the guides as well as the participants. So one bus, and we'll have time and we'll get together. There's always places where we can get together and talk at each site, and we'll do that. So. Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if Bruce is familiar with this, but we actually provide listening receivers. And so we'll have the ability for you to put on a receiver and hear Bruce talk without having to be like right next to him. So it makes it really good for our size of tour. So you won't need to worry about listening or being able to hear him.
And if you don't like what's going on, you can always put music on and pretend you're listening. So.
I have a few questions. I started to study and watch your video like that way you were explaining. What books should we read or study before we go? And then I saw that there was a famine stela. Where is that located, and do we get to see that?
We're gonna, if the museum is open, and I think it will be, I think the museum will be open, we'll actually see some of the stelas there that have the where it speaks about the children of Israel specifically. It even says in the hieroglyphics, the children of Israel. Speaking of Israel itself, if we can, there's two places I want to get to if we can, and that's all going to depend on our time and the people and how fast we move. One is the Seraphim, which is there by Saqqara. We have to go out into the desert a little bit, and then we go underground into the bedrock, and that's where they embalmed, where they have all of the sarcophagi of the bulls that they embalmed and things anciently, and that's what gave rise to the worship of the golden calf when the children of Israel left. And the second place is the Fayum Valley, and that's where the famine information is, and the famine text. There's still a canal there going into the Fayum Valley where they rerouted the water of the Nile. There's still a canal there that's called the Canal of Joseph that goes back anciently to the time that Joseph was there. So we're going to try and see all of that stuff. We're going to have a great guide. I handpicked the guides, the Egyptian guides for us to help us get into places, see things that we don't often get to see. And so we'll be able to go in depth no matter where we are. And if there's anything, and Shireen is the guide that goes with us. She's exceptional. She's knowledgeable, and she's worked with me for almost a decade or more. And we work together. And if I don't know it, she does, and if she doesn't know it, I probably don't. So, but we will be able to see the famine stela as well as the children of Israel stela.
Oh, that's great. Is the Joseph and Asenath mummies, is that in the museum or is that in Israel?
Joseph was taken back. His bones were taken back. He and his wife were taken back to Israel when Moses left Egypt. When he took the children of Israel, they were taken back and buried in close to Shechem in Israel. And it's in Palestine now. It's just north of Jerusalem, 30 minutes north of Jerusalem.
So which mummy that has the orange hair in the museum, who's he?
That's Ramses. Ramses they're supposed to have, in the new museum, they're supposed to try and put all of the mummies out on display that they have. But Ramses is the one with the reddish hair.
Okay.
And he lived up almost 90 years old, or about 90 years old. He has that reddish hair, and it's still red. It's still really red. So.
Oh, okay. What else? Which book should we, is there a specific book we can read?
Boy, that's a good question. You know, I always say the Book of Abraham is important, and that's probably more important than anything else, because a lot of what we're going to discuss is going to come from that, because Abraham talks so much about Egypt and the first pharaohs. I'm actually trying to put together a book right now that's going to be kind of like the gospel in Egypt, that will be going through the history in Egypt and its relationship to what we learned from the Abraham as well as from Joseph. And we'll have pictures and all kinds of explanations, hieroglyphics and stuff in there. I'm working on that right now, hoping that that'll be done before we ever leave, for people who are interested. So
that's great.
So far as books on Egypt, it's difficult to say which one's best. You know, a good history of Egypt is good. I'm trying to put together right now also a timeline of Egyptian pharaohs and its relation, and that relationship of the history of Egypt to the history of Israel. So
that's great. Let's see. I was studying Hebrew and gematria, and they said that Egyptian has similar
yes.
characters. Is that true? Can you put that in your book?
Well, it's I might do. You know, they're both Semitic languages because they come from off the ark. You know, if Noah has 3 sons, and the world comes from them. But they're both Semitic, or what they call Egyptian has been called Hamo-Semitic. It used to be called Hamitic for years, but now scholars call it Hamo-Semitic because of the relationship of the words. All languages were pictographic to begin with. Egyptian only has about 26, 27 letters in their alphabet, and it sounds. It's just like our alphabet. That, you know, they have an ABC also, and they only have about 27 different letters in their alphabet. But then they have bilaterals, which are 2 sounds, and then they have trilaterals, which are 3 sounds. Then they have determinatives, and they have over 700 determinatives to make sure that you don't make a mistake. See, everything goes from a state of order to a state of disorder. Languages don't evolve. They come from God, and the Adamic language is a perfect language. And the closest we can get to an Adamic language is the Egyptian and the Jaredite language. And so the Semitic language is Hebrew is going to be, there's a lot of similarities between Hebrew and Egypt, not only in pronunciation, but in the words themselves. And everything, Hebrew is all pictographic too. It began pictographic. You know, the A is an aleph, and an aleph is a cow. And we just do our cow upside down. The horns are pointing down instead of pointing up, you know, like a cow with our capital A. And so they're all related, closely related, especially in a Semitic way, just as Mesopotamia, Akkadian, Ugaritic, Chaldean, they're all Semitic languages too. So, and we'll talk about. I was
trying to find a chart with that, you know, like to see how it looks compared to the Hebrew. And do they have gematria then too, like Hebrew and Greek?
Yeah, well, Egypt has 4 different languages that 4 different writing styles in Egypt. You have hieroglyphic, which is what we look at pictures when you look at something that's Egyptian. That's if I can pull that up behind me. You know, these are hieroglyphics you see behind me. That's hieroglyphics. Then they have Demotic, which is like that's like printing. The hieroglyphics are like bold printing. Then they have hieratic, which is like script, and then they have Demotic, which is like shorthand, and then they have one that's called Merotic, which dates back from basically 700 BC to 500 BC, which is the time Lehi left. But it's called by many scholars, the Merotic is called Reformed Egyptian because they don't know. It's not quite related. So there's 4 different styles of Egyptian: hieroglyphic, hieratic, Demotic, and Merotic. And so
Okay.
We'll talk about those and their relationship. A lot of the papyrus are written in Demotic and or hieratic, and Demotic is much later. But we'll talk about those different languages and how they relate to Hebrew too, because there's some words are almost exactly the same. You know, the first personal pronoun in Egyptian is Anuk. That's the first personal I. Anuk is the first personal pronoun, and it's Anuk in Egyptian, and it's Ani in Hebrew. So it's almost the same thing. So.
Wow. So if this was a Melchizedek higher priesthood, did you find a square and a square symbol, the Melchizedek still there?
Oh heavens!
On the wall?
The square and the square is throughout the Middle East, and especially in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. I mean, everywhere we go, we're going to see that.
Okay.
We're going to see it all over Cairo. We're going to see it all over Jerusalem. We're going to see it everywhere we go.
Okay. That's awesome.
Okay, I wanted to let the group know that we have airfare round trip to and from Cairo out of Salt Lake City, and it's with Delta, and they're giving us a price of $13.31 per person. So that's an option that we've made available. You don't have to use that airfare if you don't want to. We'll supply you with the times that we arrive and depart, and you can book on your own. But I just wanted to let you know we do have airfare, and so if you're interested in wanting to be on that particular group flight, you'll just need to let our office know.
You can email that or call me, either way.
Yeah, email at info@legacytoursandtravel.com.
The seats are held, and that's a great advantage we have. So there's no money up front, but that price is set for us. We will need commitment by June 15th, and we'll be in touch with you before then. But just let us know now if you think you'd like to plan on that airfare, and we'll email out the group those flight times so you can do it separately if you'd like.
All right, any other questions before we sign off?
Yeah, I got a quick one. Just regarding the current COVID situation and stuff in Egypt. Are they, what level are they at? Or are they kind of like the U.S.? Or are they more like, I think I heard Israel was kind of loosening everything up recently.
Well, Bruce, have you been there? You haven't been there in the last little bit, have you?
I was there last February when they started shutting everything down.
Oh, okay.
I was in Egypt. Egypt is a little bit more open than Israel. Israel is now opening on the 21st of March. Israel's supposed to be opening up for tourism. They haven't had any tours or tourists there. I was there when they said all tourists have to leave in the next 3 days. I was one of the last ones out. I waited till the end, so I had there were seats on the plane, but and they shut down, and I understand from Israel that they're opening on the 21st of March. Now they're probably Israel. You have to understand with Israel, it's a little bit different because they're in a state of war and they have to protect themselves. But Egypt is a little bit more free and open than Israel is. I think that my personal feeling is that for international travel, it may not be by the time we go, but I think for international travel that there's going to be a requirement for a health card. They may even require you to have had the shots, probably more so for the airlines than they will for the country. That might be the case. And so, but things can change, and they often do change and change quickly. So.
I've been watching YouTubes, and Egypt's very open right now. And
yeah, they are.
In the cities, they're not wearing masks at all.
Yeah, I was on the phone with Egypt just a couple of days ago, talking to some of the people I know there and some of the guides that we're going to have and use over there. And Egypt is very open. You know, it's they deal with that kind of stuff every day. You know, COVID is nothing. So.
One more quick one. What type of government do they have in Egypt? Is it a king, or what are they?
They have a president. It's an elected government, but they have a president, a prime minister, The biggest difference in Egypt and most countries is the military, the president of the country and his cabinet and the prime minister. The president is not in control of the military. The military is separate. It's two different things. He's not the commander in chief, but it's an elected president. So it's it's pretty safe. I've been going, like I said, I've been going there since the 70s, 1974, 75, and I've never had any issues or problems. The contacts I use there, they'll meet us at the airport. They won't even meet us on the outside. They'll probably meet us in the luggage. They'll get us together. They'll pay for our visas all ahead of time. They'll take care of all of that. They'll walk us through. They make sure they're there at the airport to get us out and get us in. Even if we arrive at different times, at multiple different times, there will always be somebody there with my name or Legacy's name on it on a card to make sure that you're picked up and taken care of. It's come a long ways in the last few years, but it's still a third world. But we've got good friends there taking care of us. I've got a lot of good people I work with there.
Awesome.
Is there any special dress code? Are they Muslim or?
They are 80%, or probably a little more than 80% of the country is Muslim, and so, but it's not the Sharia law. I mean, there are a few there, and some there, but it's very much more liberal so far as Islam goes. Egypt is a much more liberal country than the rest of the Arab world, or a lot of the Arab world. But going into a mosque, if we were to go into a mosque, then they would require shoulders and knees covered, both on men and women. But it's not anything that's a worry. If you need something, you spend $5 and buy a scarf and throw over your shoulders if need be, or wrap it around your waist if you're wearing shorts or something like that. But we'll know that ahead of time, and we'll tell people ahead of time before. If what we're going to do tomorrow and what we need to wear tomorrow, but there's no real dress code. People wear shorts all the time, but if we go into a mosque or something like that, then you just need to be able to wrap something around you real quick.
I wanted to let the listeners know that we will do a pre-tour meeting departure about 3 weeks before we leave. And we'll be sending you out information on how to pack and what to plan for. And so as it gets closer, we will provide more in-depth information on packing and things like that.
And we'll have more information about what the guidelines are that'll be more accurate than what we're guessing right now.
Yeah.
Chris, one more question.
Sure.
Okay, I didn't know if it was. If we wanted to stay like an extra week, would that be dangerous? I was just thinking I understand they have a new museum that's open, and just to spend time, while we're over there, would that be possible? What do you think?
We'll spend time in the museum. We'll spend probably a good half a day or more in the museum. The museum is going to be set up chronologically, from the Old Kingdom to the first intermediate period, the Middle Kingdom, second intermediate, and then into the late kingdoms. But the museum will probably be open and ready for us. I've been watching it be constructed. It's in Giza now, right next to the pyramids. Egypt is I don't want to say that you can't stay there a little longer if you wanted to. Or do things. There is certain things in certain areas you need to be careful in. I've never had any issues or problems, but Egypt is pretty safe. The crime rate is very low in Egypt, but you just need to know what you're doing. You need to have a schedule, and you need to have a driver. You just can't. It's really difficult to get around Egypt. You can't take a bus. You have to take a taxi, and the taxi driver, unless you have a guide or a decent person, and we can arrange that for you. A taxi driver is going to take you to a papyrus shop because he gets a kickback or a cut on it, or he's going to take you to a perfume shop because he gets a kickback. So you just got to be careful about what you're doing and where you're going. So, but it can be done. Don't think that you can't. I mean, I usually like to go a day early, and just to get over the jet lag. And to me, that's the cheapest an extra day and an extra hotel day is usually the cheapest flight insurance you can get. And I often go up to the pyramids or go somewhere else when I'm in Cairo that extra day, that day before. So that's something you can do too. You know, and if you're that far, when you travel that far, you may want to go to Jordan or Petra or Israel or something like that too.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we want to thank Bruce for his time tonight and giving us an overview of what to expect in October on our tour. And we're excited that you would join us tonight, and we look forward to traveling with you later on this year. So thank you for being with us tonight.
And we will record this and post it on Facebook and put a link on our website so you can share it with friends that weren't able to get on tonight. So look for that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks,
Thanks,
Bruce.
Bruce.
Good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Go to it. It's got a pause and a stop button to the right. Don't go to the stop.